Namova. Welcome to the IndoCon 21. We are glad to welcome all of our esteemed panelists and our viewers and our listeners. So, on that similar note, hello listeners, this is Mridutpal Bhattacharya, the Deputy Chief Innovation Officer for ICL. Hello. So, we have with us today Madam Velina Shakarova, Head of Institute at the Austrian Institute for European and Security Policies AIES in Vienna, Austria. We have Mr. Sanjay Notani, partner at the Economics Law Practice, Mr. Maxim Kalyuk, Program Specialist at the UNESCO, Mr. Amit Das, Head of the Center for AI and ML at the FAI University, Mr. Abhivardhan, Managing Trustee and Chairperson of the ICL. We welcome all of you again, and without further ado, I think we have a lot to discuss, and I think, as was evident from the backstage conversations, we do really have a lot to discuss. So let's get this conversation underway, and let's start. So let's commence. My first question would be to Velina, ma'am. So, ma'am, would you and first off, I'd like to let everyone know that if anyone wishes to say anything with regards to the questions, with regards to the discussion, they may chime in as soon as the person who's being asked the question ends their answer, and they can chime in. That's not an issue. So let's have a great discussion. So, ma'am, my first question to you is: would you agree that to give inception to a certain technological affluence, the Indo-Pacific region should first have to grow exponentially in terms of resilient mechanisms, implementation in the form of counter-adversarial technology to counteract the actions of foreign hostile entities? And if so, could such counteraction cause hostilities against the regions to increase manifold? What would the geopolitical implications of such a scenario be?
Thank you very much for your invitation, and let me immediately jump into the geopolitical arena. Technology is a key component of the global power competition. According to the Global AI Index, America and China are the first and second digital powers in a list of 62 countries based on the examination of the forces accelerating AI development through three concrete pillars: investment, innovation, implementation. And the two powers, China and America, are engaged already in a fierce technological arms race, with artificial intelligence being not just another technology, but in the words of Professor Domingos, it is the next stage of technology itself. So the power that dominates in artificial intelligence is likely to dominate global affairs both economically and militarily. As we all know, artificial intelligence fascinates many, but few are really concerned with the potential geopolitical implications for the future global order. And why I am emphasizing this particular matter is because the Indo-Pacific region is going to witness the greatest concentration of global power competition in this decade, which I called the Indo-Pacific decade. In his latest book, Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Power, the author Rajiv Malhotra argues that the new AI-based power centers are located firmly in the United States and China. And he further outlines the struggle for world domination based on AI-driven technological breakthroughs as follows. A new era of colonization, namely digital colonization, is already underway. The associated economic, social, and political effects will devastate other countries, which will be relegated to the status of colonies or satellites. So I'm once again pointing to certain realities before we arrive at an answer to your question. So which country will emerge victorious from the ongoing Fourth Industrial Revolution is yet to be seen, but the winner will certainly assert its dominance over both competitors and allies in the future by setting the new norms, rules, and standards in the global affairs. Logically, there can be only one winner in such a decisive competition. Attempting to achieve dominance during the Fourth Industrial Revolution will require a quest for increased self-sufficiency in artificial intelligence, in critical technologies, and also in global supply chains reconfiguration. And the Indo-Pacific region is exactly this realm where geopolitics and geoeconomics meet in the future, whereas technology, including AI, will be decisive for the outcome of these competitions. So, in a sense, the answer lies already in my outlined response. We are going to witness a combination of multilateral and bilateral efforts, mostly, of course, with the center focused on, particularly on India, to build a counterweight to China led initiatives and programs that seek to turn Beijing into the next AI superpower. Supremacy over AI domain will also be decisive for the outcome of the global power competition, which is why the United States, together with like minded partners, are going to turn their attention increasingly to the Indo Pacific region. Sectors such as artificial intelligence, but also defense, cyber, space technologies will witness strategic investments to promote growth of new regional power centers. And that would mean private, public sector, it would mean bottom up and also top down investments. This is also important since any significant breakthroughs in these areas will bestow global competitiveness and geoeconomic advantages. I will stop here.
Absolutely. So would anyone like to say anything about that, or about what ma'am said?
Okay. So, although I would have said, or I would have started in the last because I'm kind of a host. I'm the head of the organization which is organizing this event. But I'm only doing this because even I have read Rajiv Ji's book, which Velina mentioned. In fact, the discussion she had with Ruchir and Abhijit Chavda, if I remember, with Rajiv Ji, even she highlighted, and viewers must watch that. So, on a larger context, I think when it comes to the Indo-Pacific, there are three factors which I see, and I generally have more interest in culture, policy, and their intersection with technology from a much practical perspective. How they, I would say, amalgamate into legal processes. So, from a perspective, I think the Indo-Pacific has to be very much India-centric, which is yes. If India is to be considered as an actor to combat Chinese influence, then yes, it should be a reasonable actor which creates its own regulatory considerations, which are much wider, and not just regulatory. When it comes to even countering specific issues, India's role in the region will matter a lot, especially when it comes to its cooperation with Southeast Asian countries, or whether it's whether it is India's cooperation with West Asian countries. The second element, which I usually see, which the panelists can also converse about more, is the Indo-European connect, which is related to India and European countries. Not just India and European Union, but I'll say India and European countries, because within them there is a sense of diversity of not just diplomatic considerations, but also I would say some political and legal considerations, which of course the European Union has a bigger role. That is agreed when it comes to regulatory issues. But I think from a perspective of cooperation, I think Europe and I think there Africa would come in, but not right now. I'm not getting into that. I think Europe and India would really much matter in this aspect, like India and the US when it comes to the current issues. And the last one, which I would say, which I think we may discuss or not, is the context of estimating what is the Indian approach at the end of the day, which I think panelists who are from India, like Mr. Notani or Mr. Amit Das, I will speak the least on this because I'm the host in that sense. But I think the panelists from India can also confer on that if necessary. But I think I must stop there. I think if other panelists wish to say something, please go ahead.
All right then. So I guess no one has anything to say about this for now. So I would really like to jump to the next question, and this one is for Maxim sir. So Maxim sir, we are aware that the EU is a significant actor to the Indo-Pacific. However, we may as well observe that many models of legislations and executive decisions mirrored those of the ones presented and accepted in the EU. It's also a fact that the Personal Data Protection Bill in the pipeline for India happens to be a bit akin to the General Data Protection Regulations, whereas the EU developed their GDPR based upon their own cultural and civilizational prerogatives. Could you shed some illumination upon the significance of cultural values and morals in development and implementation of such legislations? And would you agree that the actors of the Indo Pacific need to find their own rhythms and work upwards from their own cultural prerogatives and then form such legislations?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Since I come from UNESCO, I think I will focus more on UNESCO rather than EU in this regard, but I will link this indeed to these cultural differences. And it's actually very relevant in the sense that we are currently at UNESCO, which is United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, is developing the recommendation on the ethics of artificial intelligence. Currently, there is no global framework for AI governance as such, but the representatives of UNESCO member states, including those from Indo-Pacific, after a month of constructive dialogue and negotiation, agreed on the draft text of this sort of template of the ethical development and deployment of AI, which will be submitted for adoption to the General Conference this November. And hopefully after the adoption, the implementation will start. So here I would say that in this recommendation, which talks about values, about principles, but also about policy, concrete policy actions, and provide for some tools which I can explore later on how to implement them. It talks also about different ethical systems along with cultural diversity. But at the same time, so it recognizes that. But and we have 193 member states in the organization. We have to kind of align them somehow. So at the same time, the goal was to find the ethical common ground that will allow the international community to advance in achieving the responsible use of AI technologies. And you mentioned data. Data is a big part of AI technology, AI methods currently used. So because we know about this algorithm that have been trained on data, and there are lots of risks and considerations to take care of there. So this recognition of different ethical and cultural systems. So so there is a need to have a dialogue with all of them. Or otherwise pluralism, which is to avoid relativism and to ensure that the common basis in ethics is achieved. It's one of the things that we have to do. And it's importantly that in the definition of the AI ethics, we have, I mean, it's a long and complex definition. I will not go into detail there, but we end this with that this understanding of ethics of AI offers a basis in the end to accept or even reject AI technologies, but let's say by different society, by different application, or by different fields, dependent. Because in fact, there are lots of research shown that actually not all fields do require, or there are lots of negative outcomes coming from application of those technologies in particular fields, or you can achieve the same result without even using them. So this is something to keep in mind. So in this sense, the recommendation considers ethics as a dynamic basis for normative evaluation and guidance of AI technologies. Now, so we also know that these technologies in general and the AI technologies in particular, they evolve very quickly, and it's not always easy to anticipate their impact. And that is why even having a fixed set of principles or legislation you were talking about, or ethical codes, is not also always enough, and there is a need for an inclusive ethical reflection which accompanies the technological developments all the time. So now going back to this, you were talking about GDPR and data policy. We have, as I said in the recommendation, a strong data policy area on data as such, which we believe is a common ground for all states. So there is no need to, let's say, to focus on one particular system, but we managed because it underwent both expert drafting and public consultation, both global and regional, including in the Pacific. And then negotiations by member states, and they found certain common ground on approaches to data, which highlights the importance of data governance, promotes a better understanding of the role of data in developing secure and equitable algorithms, and set the rules for keeping the control over the data in the hands of users, allowing them to access and delete information as needed. And it also calls on member states to ensure that appropriate safeguards for the possession of sensitive data and effective accountability schemes are devised, and to provide certain redress mechanisms in the event of harm. So I'll stop here and we can continue further. Thanks.
Absolutely. So would anyone like to add anything to what sir said? Okay. So my next question would be to Sanjay Notani sir. If sir is here, I think Sanjay sir is having some net issues.
Yeah, yeah, I'm audible.
Okay, okay. So thank you, sir. So my first question to you is, how much enthusiasm and commitment, in your opinion, do technology startups and tech giants devote towards concepts such as accountability and liability and ridding their mechanism of black box issues to make them explainable with regards to commercial effectiveness of such devotion? And what should the Indo Pacific viewpoint on the same be? And especially since the Indo Pacific is aiming at free, resilient, open, and inclusive technology infrastructure.
Uh, so before I start, first of all, thank you for this opportunity. I would like to thank everybody for being a very strong panel for this. Very quickly to start, Ritupal, I think to do justice to this question in a very short while would be difficult because I see bundle of questions. Let me be, let me start with very very simple things, and then we will move into answering these questions. See, when we are looking out for this whole issue of what the tech giants and others should devote, I think it's interesting to first find out where are we today and what is the legitimate expectation of the community, of the countries, of people, of consumers. And it starts to say that what today the race is asking is for an explainable AI, which is what the theme of this whole session is, which means ultimately we need to get reasons for the decision. And that comes out with many sort of things saying there should be a set of processes and methods that allows people or users to comprehend and trust the results out by all the MLA algorithms. Now we know there are certain machine learning systems which can give you those kinds of answers, which are whether you use the decision trees, whether you use the Bayesian classifiers or other algorithms. Ultimately, there has to be a prediction and there has to be a traceability. And so that is a ask which we need to start with. Coming to the next, as far as possible, the whole issue of the black box is concerned, and I think that is something which we've been seeing since the last few years and particularly very strong. Uh, you know, Unfortunately, it is becoming a very, very expensive affair for companies to go on like this. We have examples of Goldman Sachs, which was facing its investigation for the Apple Card by the New York Department of Financial Services. In 2019, there was an entrepreneur who complained to the Twitter that despite of his wife's credit score being better, he got a credit limit which was 20 times higher than his wife, which was clearly a very surprising thing. Now, surely we know that there were answers in terms of bias, which we need to understand how did this whole sort of system work. And last but not the least, it's a very, very expensive affair, not only for the regulators, but ultimately for the companies. So somewhere or the other, we need to, get the record straight on most of these issues. Uh, you know, all different kinds of biases, whether we call it the measurement bias, exclusion bias, prejudicial bias, confirmation bias. All these are different biases which we need to do, and there is no better way to have these things resolved. Coming back to the Indo-Pacific is concerned, I think Velina very, very strongly and clearly put this forth. Yes, while this fight was purely between the US and China, maybe it was towards many other cultural, other sort of systems and powers of goods, services. But today, the fight is on technology. And when we talk about this, it's important to understand that it is not only the US, it is an alignment of Indo-Pacific. Today we are seeing it, it is happening in defense. In the last 3 to 4 weeks, we've seen on defense, there is clearly an alignment. Today we see there are conversations between countries of Quad countries. Now, I wouldn't want to stop it only at Indo-Pacific. I can say it starts from the land of the rising sun, which is from Japan all the way to America. Now, how are we going to sort of, deal with these issues? There, I like clearly what Maxim said. There are global principles, there are regional principles. Ultimately, there are common principles which we will have to bind ourselves, negotiate on those principles, and clearly get on. And last but not the least, I remember the movie which is Last Man Standing. There are only two sides of the war. So countries will have to choose of which side they are. Companies will have to choose which side they are. And ultimately, this is where I see the Indo-Pacific moving forward. So I'll just stop at that. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Would anyone like to add anything?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I want to wrap it up because this was a perfect, so to say, insight into a highly complex topic. And in a sense, we are already in a situation of a bifurcation of the global system. All middle powers are trying to oscillate between United States and China. We are already observing this tendency, this trend also in the technological domain. So at some point, middle powers, regional centers of power will have to deal with an either or choice. And just to make a clarification about what I understand under Indo-Pacific region. So I actually refer to the definition of the director of the National Maritime Foundation, Gurpreet Khurana, who describes this geopolitical space as one that stretches from the Indian and Western Pacific Oceans to the coastal regions of West Africa and East Africa. That would, of course, mean also United States, Japan, so basically the Quad countries, and of course also including parts of Africa.
Absolutely. Would anyone else like to add anything? Okay. So on the context of companies and technology, like in new age emerging tech innovations, I would like to ask my next question to Amit Das sir. So a recent article that I noted, it was in the Diplomat. A recent article had identified three pillars that need to be worked upon and the most, and that should be on the watch list for emergent trends in technology in the Indo-Pacific, namely spatial computing technology, resilient infrastructure, and counter-adversarial technology. Would you agree with the same, so as to say that these three cornerstones need to be at the forefront in terms of development and implementation of the technology in the Indo-Pacific? So I think you're on mute, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Bhattacharya. And today the forum is very good, and I very like to listen Valina ma'am, Maskim sir, and Mr. Sanjay sir. Before I starting my answer, just I want to give you the very good example. You just take the example of us, means Homo sapiens. We are the Homo sapiens, right? And think about it biologically. Think that we are our forefathers were the monkeys, but right now we are you see that we are controlling the monkeys. Why? Because due to the intelligentsia. Because now similarly about where when you are talking about the AI, there is a very interesting quotation quoted by the Mr. Andrew Ng, who is the founder of Landing AI China, that in the recent year, in the next coming 10 year 20 years, the AI will be the most electricity of for the world, right? Now the second important thing is that now AI, the IT, or you may say the digital infrastructure, they are redefining the global powers. and especially if you talk about the Indo-Pacific region, and it is very important for us. For example, you take the very good example of the Kosovo. Kosovo is a very small city, a small city country, but how they have deployed the digital power to recognize themselves. So in same condition, in the recent development, the technologies which you have quoted, it is very true for the Indian companies that if they want to control the world, then they must go proceed towards those technologies. Because just for example, you take the Indian economy, the size of the Indian economy. The size of the Indian economy is more than $3.5 trillion, right? And if you take the example of the US technology, your five tech giants, like it is known as the FRANG, like Facebook, Apple, Netflix, and this Amazon and Google, that complete their size is approximately $3.64 trillion. Now they are the controlling the entire world. And if you want to justify yourself in this entire in the world, then you have to proceed such kind of technology. You have to think about such kind of spatial technology. You have to reinforce your technical backgrounds, and you have to think about the new kind of technology, AI based technologies, because the AI is the future. And you know that in the next within 5 or 10 years, technology will redefine the global politics and redefine the global diplomacy. Why? Suppose right now you take any country right now you, if you want to control the world, and you must have required a big size of military, you have required good kind of arsenals. But if you want to use the technology, you have not required such kind of big investment. Means suppose you want to use the AI, you have required just 100 crores or 200 crores, and within a 200 crores you may easily control the any country's political infrastructure by controlling their behavior, by controlling their social media. So that's why it is a very that's why it is necessary for us to think in such kind of technology for the future. And it is true that in this will definitely it will control the entire world. Basically I am from the technology background, pure AI man, pure programming man. I think I am not too good as ma'am and Maxim sir and Sanjay sir. But yes, whatever I am discussing with you, it is my personal views which I am getting from different inputs. The what could be a technology do, or what tech giants could do in the future.
Well, absolutely, absolutely. I think a certain like policy perspective is very important, true, but
Hmm.
a certain amount of technical clarity is really good as well. And I think you can like provide a lot of technical clarity to this panel right here. So thank you for coming in as well. So
I want to add on one more thing. I think you know about the deep mind. This is a part of the Google. This is a very famous game, AlphaGo, which are developed by the Google, right? You think in 2016, it was a big case for the Chinese viewers, that when AlphaGo defeated a human brain, right? In 2017 June, the Chinese government, they launched their new AI policy to control the world. Now think about how aggressive their AI based roadmap. Now complete Chinese government, they want to control the AI skill of the world. Now every country must think about it. And when Chinese will do this, then they easily control the complete Pacific region, complete Indo-Pacific region. And it is completely a complete a strong competition for the US companies also. Because before 2016 there was a supremacy of the US companies. But after post 2016, after this AI policy launched by the Chinese government, now the Chinese companies are the towards the supremacy of the intelligence, supremacy race. For example, you take the example of the Tesla cars, or Google pilotless car. How much time they have taken invested for the Google pilot? They have, I think, more than 10 years they are doing research. But in Chinese company, within 2 years, they have established the same parameters which Google has established for the cars. Now you think about it, how Chinese government, how Chinese people, they are working with the AI to control over the entire geopolitics of the world. And AI will another definition to control in geopolitics.
True, I guess. So I think Valina ma'am was saying something about how the world might turn out in the next 10 or 1 or 2 decades period. So my question to her is, what according to you is the highest rung of the ladder that the Indo-Pacific can reach in terms of technological implementation in the next 10 years, with the adequate aid from the EU and other friendly entities, and how much of a role would diplomatic actions play in securing such aid against all odds of hostilities being enacted against all the groups in alignment?
Okay, so we saw from the first half of our panel discussion that digital technologies such as AI and also data science will undoubtedly lead to technological breakthroughs in various domains, from the global commons such as public health and climate issues to the military domain, to startups and private sector. Concurrently, the actual use of these tools raises a number of ethical, legal, and societal questions that were also addressed partially to in the first part of this discussion. Now, the transformation of digital technologies could lead to the creation of permanent surveillance societies in which all data collection and storage is in fact under state control. In this respect, China can play a major role, model function for future authoritarian regimes in the Middle East, in Africa, in Asia, or Latin America. Now, the political scientist Andrew Michter argues that we must recognize that we are facing not China as a civilization, but rather as a communist power whose ideology has always been at its core totalitarian. What is unfolding before our eyes and has been underway for the last 3 decades since the end of the Cold War is the second and possibly decisive and final stage of conflict between liberal democracy and communism. So when we talk about bifurcation of global system, it's not only about the global power competition in various key domains, but it's also about ideology and about whose role model is going to be imposed on the international relations in the future. So why am I saying this? If there is one country that has not only successfully dealt with colonialization, but also applied a unique approach in the struggle for world domination during the Cold War, it is India. India is this missing geopolitical puzzle piece in the newly emerging equilibrium in the Indo-Pacific region and beyond. There might be multilateral and bilateral engagements in the future. For instance, the quadrilateral format, the so-called Quad, between the US, Japan, Australia, and India, is a geopolitical constellation aimed at building counterweight to China's presence in the Indo-Pacific region, and it already began to yield successes, specifically in the field of AI. India and Japan, for instance, signed an agreement to cooperate on AI-driven initiatives. The US-based National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence advocated for the formation of a US-India Strategic Tech Alliance. Other formal AI cooperation agreements and alliances could be negotiated with Australia, Japan, New Zealand, South Korea, Vietnam, and beyond. And this would open up a huge space of new business opportunities for India. As I said, top-down, but also bottom-up. New Delhi could become, as I said, this missing strategic puzzle piece in the new equation with digital powers like the US, but also the European Union, which has just signed the first big tech cooperation agreement, including also cooperation in the field of data and artificial intelligence. in my view, India will play a key role in the geopolitics of technologies due to several factors. The country represents the largest open data market in the world, with the highest per capita consumption of data. India is working on a personal data protection bill and has been invited by the G20, including 19 countries and the European Union, to sign the data-free flow with the so-called trust. The Asian giant will also seek to improve its AI infrastructure and is counting on strategic US investments to expand its technological reach and to address challenges to its territorial and cyberspace integrity from China in the future. New Delhi is seen also as an indispensable member of recent multilateral efforts around AI. As I said, so we have multilateral, we have bilateral efforts combined as one. So one of the most significant developments is the establishment of this so-called global partnership on artificial intelligence, whose goal is to join forces to advance technological developments and the use of AI among like-minded countries or like-minded partners. This coalition includes India, but excludes China, and that is a clear signal. To prevent the so-called digital colonialization, the term launched by Rajiv Malhotra, the most plausible scenario would be for the US and India to join forces and coordinate actions and measures against China's growing influence in the Indo-Pacific region and beyond. US President Biden may be wary of continuing former President Donald Trump's attempts to cut China off from global trade and technology networks for fear of triggering a so-called new Cold War. But in reality, we are already observing certain efforts in specific areas to contain China. India will need to carefully navigate between these two powers while strategically aligning with Washington on AI. India's geopolitical choices are, in fact, wrapped up as a group of two options. Either join the US-led bloc of predominantly Anglosphere allies and close partners like Japan, Australia, and so on. And here I see also a clear risk of a fragmented West if the Anglosphere countries partition from the EU led bloc within the West in the future. Or as a second option, what India might also follow is basically to build partnerships and alliances of non-aligned middle powers, once again, that can navigate the complex relationship between Washington and Beijing without taking sides. So either or, India will will play a central role and will take a central position and will be very much quite decisive for the outcome of not only the fourth industrial revolution and specifically the AI-driven technological breakthroughs, but in reality for the global power competition equilibrium.
Well, I could not agree with you more on that. So, would anyone like to add anything to what ma'am said? Okay. If we are to talk about transparency, if we are to talk about accountability, liability, a public trust doctrine, um, I would like I would like to ask my next question to Maxim sir. So, in your opinion, does XAI, explainable AI, as an ethics conundrum, deal with the cyber and digital risks that emerge in the Indo-Pacific region adequately? And if not, then what modifications, assumptions, and understandings are needed?
Yes, thanks for the question. So we know that AI can be misused for malicious purposes, but also generally it's increasingly being used by public and private entities to inform decisions across all domains of life. And from what, for example, Mr. Natanya referred to, we talk about credit scoring or job recruitment and decision regarding judicial outcomes. This is all increasingly being engaged in AI technologies therein. So we need certain principles such as explainability to ensure that AI remains within the control of humans. And explainability here refers to making intelligible and providing insight into the outcomes of AI systems. And the AI actor should commit to ensure that the algorithms developed are explainable. So in the case of AI applications that impact the end user in a way that is not temporary, easily reversible, or otherwise low risk, it should be ensured that the meaningful explanation is provided with any decisions that results in the action taken. But here explainability is not the only thing, because it's closely related to other notions that you also mentioned, like transparency, because greater transparency indeed contributes to more peaceful, just, democratic, inclusive societies, and it allows for public scrutiny that can decrease corruption and discrimination, and can also help detect and prevent negative impacts on human rights, on human dignity. So transparency here aims at providing appropriate information to the addressees to enable their understanding of the technology and to foster trust in such technologies and their use. At the same time, while efforts need to be made to increase those transparency and explainability, the level of transparency and explainability should always be appropriate to the context and the impact. There may be need to balance between with other principles, such as privacy or safety or security. But in any event, people should be fully informed when a decision is made on the basis of AI algorithms and should have an opportunity to request explanatory information. This is some of the things that we underline in the recommendation that I talked, recommendation on the ethics of AI that I talked about earlier. So in addition, individuals should be able to access the reasons for a decision affecting their rights and freedoms. However, this is also not the end. There's also kind of at the beginning you started, because in order to make sure that these principles work, we also need to ensure adequate responsibility and accountability measures. So it's not purely about the explainable AI as such, but it's kind of a combination of various principles and concrete actions that we take, in particular, ensure, because currently we still do not have clear rules on responsibility, accountability, and liability. I mean, in the sense of legal responsibility. And these are not easy issues, and this is not something that even we were. It is possible, I think, on have global common ground in such specific things. But at the same time, something that we, for instance, achieved a consensus is that it's always should be a person should always be responsible in the end, ultimately responsible to the actions or to the outcomes of the use of AI systems.
Well,
Also,
yes. I would like to ask you another question, and this is something that I have wondered, that while the UNESCO was like drafting the recommendations, were there certain civilizational or cultural aspects, prerogatives, let's just say, which influenced the ethical standards that need to be adhered to, and and if so, then how did it happen, and how did the people actually realize what they were? Like, what is the exact process behind it?
so just to clarify, how the cultural difference influenced, you mean, or yeah, of course. I mean, yeah, definitely. I mean, that's you see it clearly during the negotiations, because there are different interests involved, different approaches. Well, I mean, it's not. I mean, in practice, that was absolutely visible. But even in theory, there has been research. In particular, there is an interesting research done about by MIT about when you have a self-driving car and there is no way avoid certain injury or even death. Like there is a person on the way. What do you do? Does the self-driving car, should it hit the person that is on the way, or should, let's say, hit the wall and kill the driver? So what do you choose? And they were asking people in different parts of the world, I mean, what would you do? and you see different responses. I mean, different priorities in different cultures, and they even the research showed that division into sort of called Western, Eastern countries, etc., etc. And there were different preferences in terms of even age of, depending on age of people who were in front, who were supposed to be hit, or even between what kind of animals they prefer. So, and this is even in theory that was already visible, and in practice, of course, that was clearly visible. There were different priorities for different countries. For instance, for some countries, it was data sovereignty was a very important concept to have. And for others, it wasn't absolutely. It was they were absolutely against anything like that. So there are many concepts which did not find its way because there was no clear consensus on those. That's why. I just gave you just one example. There was also an example of having differentiated but common responsibility, which is known in the environmental law. Some countries tried to bring it to AI, field of AI ethics, which also did not at this stage find kind of consensus on this regard. So there are many concepts which some countries prioritized from their specific backgrounds, but did not find like kind of common convergence on the global area. So, and examples are really multiple. And the way you deal with this, of course, is negotiation. Basically, you give something here and you get something in another place, and the reverse. So everyone in the end had to. I mean, that's just how negotiations go.
Oh, well, thank you for that. Thank you for answering that question. I really wanted to know how it goes. So I would like to ask my next question to Amit sir. So what, according to you, are the inhibitors holding back the Indo-Pacific from becoming a world-leading region in technology and other than economical factors? Also, how would you equate the intermingling of AI technology with other disruptive and non-disruptive technology in the Indo-Pacific region? And how much of significance, in your opinion, does AI tech really hold in the Indo-Pacific, keeping the commercial profitability aside?
Sorry.
You are on mute. Yeah,
No,
yeah.
no, no, sorry, I'm very sorry. I want to directly jump to the question about the disruptive and non-disruptive technologies. As you know that right now the AI is the one of the most driving factor for the every kind of technology, from banking to agriculture, and from biomedical engineering to rocket science. So that's why if you're talking about the disruptive or non-disruptive technologies, AI is one of the most important. Suppose you take the example of the nuclear weapons. The most of the countries, most of the global powers, they want to use the AI to control the nuclear weapons. If you go to different research, if you go to read about the Brookings, if you go to read the Rand Corporation, you may take a lot of articles have research work that published by them, that how these countries are trying to use the AI technology to control such complex technologies. Because there's a very famous theory in our engineering that complex systems always create the more complex systems, and it is not easy to control such systems with the simple human brains, right? So that's why it is important for us to use the AI. For example, you take another example. Recently China, they established a group, how China would control the complete global geopolitics with the use of AI. Why China wants to use the AI for the geopolitics? Because the AI is one of the best kind of technology to predict the human brain, or global leaders brain, or they may easily describe the complete matrix of the movement, of psychometrics of the leaders, what they want to do in the this diagram. So that's why it is a very simple thing that AI is going to be an important part of our disruptive or non-disruptive technologies and all the time. The second important question, that which is my understanding, that he wants to know that in the global Pacific, what will the future of the AI, right? Am I right, sir? in my opinion, what is my opinion by the different reports when I go to the different reports of the government of India, and recently I was reading a very good report from the France, that within the next 10 years, a lot of investment would be pumped in India for the in AI enabled for the AI business. Why? Because that India is a very big market, right? And second, in India, the most of the companies, they want to be a AI, either AI powered organizations or AI enabled organizations. There are two things: one is the AI powered organization, one is the AI enabled organizations, right? uh, for such kind of organization, and in India, normally, if you take the example of India, Indo-Pacific, right now we are at the stage of only the plug in play technology of the AI, right? We are okay, it is true that we are talking about the AI, every country is talking about the AI, but is it but we are so serious about the AI? No, we are using the AI only according to need of the hour, or we are want to customizing the AI to according to the problem, right? Means we are using the AI as a plug and play technology, right? But if you take the Indian market scenario, within a 10-year Indian government, if you take the Indian government, if you take the global complete global arena, then you may see that India is one of the cheap place to for the such kind of skills, AI skills. So that's why it is going to be a very huge market, and it is a very huge football field for the AI. So this is my opinion, this is my point of view.
Maybe I
Well,
can add just one sentence, because I share Amit's optimism, which is a pragmatic optimism in a sense, because I also see it in a similar scenario from there. I mean, in 10 years from now, if India succeeds in ensuring its evolving domestic data architecture, um, of course, by supporting its international interests, with the clear view to benefit not only from the global power competition, but in a sense to strengthen partnerships, alliances with other like-minded partners. So this is not going to be a single act by an individual actor. This is going to be a collective effort where India can play really an important central role, in fact.
Velina ma'am, I want to sorry interrupt you. I want to add one more thing. In India, in New Delhi, right now they are practicing the Atmanirbhar Bharat in defense sector, right? In defense sector, as you know, that our future warfare, they are completely going to be a hybrid kind of warfares, or completely high definition technological warfare, right? And if you want to deal with such kind of high definition warfare, then you have required the high definition technologies. So that's why in India is going to be that's why the AI enabled organizations, or AI research organizations, they are trying to land in India for the Atmanirbhar Bharat. And second thing, Indian government, they are also trying to develop the best kind of missiles and best kind of submarines, naval warfare, for the very high definition naval warfare. So it is very true that if you are talking about the high definition naval warfare, means you have required some kind of disrupted, or some such kind of high definition AI based technology. So that's why our Indian policy, that Modi government policy about the Atmanirbhar Bharat, is going to enforce the AI in Indian market in a very in a defensive manner. Yes,
well,
Mr. Bhattacharya.
yes. Well, there are talks for nuclear submarines where among like between UK and Australia, between Australia and US.
Hmm.
So if we are to talk about naval warfare, I think it would take a lot of time. So let's
No, Mr. Bhattacharya. I have the I am very lucky to work with the some naval projects, and I want to assure you that Indian, if you go and read about the Indian naval powers or naval technologies, you'll be very happy. You
sure
will be very happy.
I will
I
most
will be. I
certainly
will.
do
You
that.
will be very happy. Off the route, I will share with you some links, and you could not imagine the how Indian naval war power, how Indian Navy is using very high definition, technology for the naval warfare. You could not imagine. You could not imagine, sir. This is out of imagine of the for Indian natives. When you read about it now, then you will easily find out the which kind of technology Indian government, you leave the media reports, you leave the media other reports, you just go and read the US reports, you just go and read about the different research report, and you just go, then you will easily understand that which kind of work Indian naval warfares are doing. And for their and Indian Navy is one of the finest navy in the world. They are using the AI in their operational level, but we don't know about it.
Sure, absolutely. I would definitely love to read some of it, and I will most
Mhm.
certainly. For now, let's go first with the question for. Okay, I'd like to ask Abhivardhan. How should the Indo-Pacific progress towards the development, implementation, and adequate research and development of AI technology, as well as other disruptive and non-disruptive technology, with the cultural obligations, customs, and histories in the backdrop, while having them as a constant influence? What should the Indic approach ideally be, and how much of it should be adapted and implemented?
So I hope that I do not turn out to be cryptic. So I'll be very specific in what I mean. So R&D is something which, when it comes to AI technology, is a very interesting issue. Now, in intellectual property, we see that uh, there are arrangements between different patent offices, whether it is the Japanese patent office or the South Korean patent office or the Australian patent office, and even the Indian in patent office. So I think when it comes to the Indo-Pacific in a much all-comprehensive manner, of course it is about China. Of course, there's no doubt about it that it is about China. It doesn't matter what the Quad leaders say in the US, but we know that at a strategic level, it is about China. It is about countering China. But having that said, I also consider that if we take the European Union for a while, we see an interesting thing, that the concept of the rules based international order with the perspective of resilience of global supply chains, as we call it, and the aspect of a the aspect of an order which more focuses on resilience in a situation which is more neo-realist, because we know that we are in a multipolar situation. And as Velina pointed out about two scenarios, the first scenario of aligning with the Anglosphere countries, especially US, UK, and so on, and the second scenario, which is kind of partnering with non-aligned countries. So I would like to focus on both, but I'll get on the second one first and the first one later, because I think on the first one we see a firm aspect of cooperation. But I think that there will be for India both of the scenarios coming, but of course the US will be a very important strategic partner. Maybe it will become an ally in some decades. I don't know, but it is pretty clear that cooperation with the Americans is something which is inevitable. Now, when it comes to the second aspect, which is cooperating with non-line countries, an important thing which is to be estimated is that the very understanding of the Indo-Pacific has to be seen from a perspective of what is the rules-based order at the first place. Of course, there are issues when it comes to maritime and so forth, because as we discuss, we understand that explainable AI has a lot to do with various knowledge systems and their paradigms of management as well. Because we have to understand that while developmental economics will play a very important role in countries like Papua New Guinea or Indonesia, and even in India, because when we take India, India has a mixed situation. In some areas it is pre-industrial, in some areas it is industrial, in some areas it is very well doing. So of course AI startups are going up, AI technologies usage is going up, but when a whole ecosystem will become, when it comes to cooperation and so forth with European and even Anglophone countries, I think interestingly we'll see that uh, at a level of implementation, how knowledge dynamics is understood for both developmental economy, and we have to understand the role of conflict economy as well. And why is because since AI is disruptive and it's such a technology which is very much omnipresent and omnipotent. If people read the UNESCO AI recommendations, the June 2021 draft, they will find very interestingly that the ethos of the document very well represents the omnipresent and omnipotent aspects of AI that in public life, it has a much technocratic role to play. It doesn't matter what kind of data is being taken, but the way it has been democratized that matters, and the way, of course, its implications are they matter. We already see that in that sense, whether we see in the domain of defense or whether we see in the domain of public life when it comes to basic aspects of soft power, and I'm not, of course, taking it in a sense of what Joseph Knight Jr. only said. I'm saying in a more sense of weaponization because, of course, we know that there are new means of warfare as well as other things concerned with it. We see a very interesting trend that as digital feudalism and digital colonization is, of course, there, as Amitji mentioned about the companies, America and China. I think India's role will be also to get its fair share to gain much optimized relevance. And I think companies are already doing that. The government is clear on this. The quad leaders have, of course, agreed on the technology principles. Just, I think, I would say last week, if I'm right, exactly last week, last Sunday, if I'm right, according to Indian time at least, I would say. So, in that regard, I think we are on a right path. But when it comes to Indo-Pacific, as I said in the beginning, it is more about India centricity as well because of India's pivotal role, not just in geopolitics but also regionally. So when we know the pivotal role of India, it is very clearly estimable that uh, the Indo-Pacific has to be understood with an India-centric way. So wherein I think on culture, I will most probably say that I think already actors are doing, and there can be new cultural intelligence as well as I would say design thinking approaches that can develop both in regulatory theory, which is technology law, your public technology law and private technology law aspects, and yes, of course, they can translate in dispute resolution mechanisms as well in future. Because yes, I can remember one very interesting case. I should mention that. So there is a person called Stephen Thaler who basically shared his technology, AI technology known as Dabus. And he tried to show everywhere in the USPTO, in the European Union Patent Office, everywhere, even in the UK Patent Office, that this is something which is an AI, and this AI system uh, can be something which can be an inventor itself. Now, the problem is in patent law around the world, even in WIPO constitution. Now, I'm not talking about WIPO constitution, of course, I'm talking about intellectual property at an international law level. We do not recognize AI as inventors. And although for others it may seem a jurisprudence issue, I see it more of an issue in future because if people follow Balaji Srinivasan, who's a very interesting technology geek and crypto geek, you'll find that uh, companies represent themselves as pseudo states when it comes to their compliance policies, it comes to their resource policies. So yes, digital feudalism is there. And yes, when it comes to the influence of various companies, and not just Chinese companies, also American and other kinds of companies, how they align accordingly, how the regulatory reach of the governments is becoming reasonable, because even at the international level there should be some consensus, even if limited or minimal. I think there is it where India's role should be seen in a much critical way. Otherwise, of course, if we see the basics, India is already on the right track. But I think from an advanced level, I think pseudo states will matter a lot. And I see more because I have more concerns on soft power, not on hard power. I do not work on hard power at all. But I see that the role of soft power will definitely come in. When I say soft power domain, I generally mean the basic conditions and the basic aspects of human life, the basic conditions where we talk about human rights or economic livelihood and all of that. I don't actually talk about defense. So I would rest my case. But yeah, of course, if people wish to add, please go ahead.
Abhivardhanji, I want to add one word. Your topic, you're discussing a very interesting thing. Now there is a very famous word known as digital citizens. Digital citizens means suppose I am doing a job in Google, right? And suppose I'm the head of I'm heading the entire Google and Asia Pacific. Then I should follow the Google rules and regulations. I could not follow the Indian rules and regulations. Now now the digital the tech companies, they are going to be a country, big country. And this will again redefine the entire. After 5 years, it will redefine the entire society of the world. Now, it may be possible that after 10 years or 20 years, your citizenship may be defined by the name of the countries, because it's a digital citizenship, a new kind of thing. And they are the big empires. Like ma'am is also using the word the digital colonization. Yes, it is. After 10 years, things will be completely changed. The theories will be failed. Entire theory will be failed. And complete thing will be changed, because it is my feelings.
Yeah. Just to add a little bit more, because this is where it gets interesting. So when you say digital citizens, what it means is also is that so earlier, when the Asia Pacific concept in economic affairs became very popular in ASEAN countries like Singapore, Japan, and so on, very interestingly, we see that China was also participant in it. Of course, I mean, if we see Chinese economic relations with Australia and all of these countries, of course, that is now escalating in a different sense, and realignment is happening. But I would be very happy to see the success of the Indo-Pacific as an idea, economically also, because that's what we need. And I'm just hypothesizing. When we see that somebody who represents Adobe says that I represent the Indo-Pacific region and not the Asia-Pacific region, that will be a very interesting form of strategic alignment to see even among companies. Because I think even for companies, it's a matter of, I would say, not being comfortable with the compliances and the other issues, because there are regulatory costs involved. So I would be very happy to see the flourishing of the Indo-Pacific economically also, which will boost the Quad, boost the Indo-France cooperation in general, like for example, the Indo-Japanese cooperation and so forth, the Indo-European cooperation also. So of course that, and even if you see in the Europe, I'll see that the way interpretations happen. So I did not complete that Stephen Thaler thing. Let me do it fast. That was very important because in an Australian case, what happened? That the judge said that AI can be an inventor but not a patentee. It's like a
Yes.
parent-son relationship, very simply. Okay, I can have an AI system, I can be the patentee, but the AI can be an inventor. Now that is being challenged by the Australian government, of course. The Australian Patent Office, the IP office, basically, the Australian government is already challenging it. But why am I saying it is very important to see is because companies are very, very fast when it comes to creative interpretations in law as well as policy that can impact in dispute resolution. And since we see the backlash that I think the European Parliament very recommended, manifested when it comes to the CAI, the China, which of course is on a halt for now, we of course see that the role of private companies will take a role. But since China is very much state controlled and the companies are on a crackdown these days, I don't think the role of private actors in China would emanate a lot, because again that's not happening for now. But let us see, who knows. So I may be wrong on that, but again, let us see.
No, you're right. And you take the example of the Copenhagen. Recently, Copenhagen, they established a department, and they appointed Mr. Casper Klinzy as their digital ambassador, right? Because they want to create a very good relationship between a state and tech giants. See how they are changing their approach. Before it, we was approaching the state and state, relation between state and state. Now it is redefined themselves. Now we are going to create a relation between state and tech giants. Because you take the example of Twitter, you take the example of the Facebook, how Twitter and Facebook could abolish your image, international image. Now, if you are a government, then you must create a very good relationship with your Twitter also. Beside the China and Pakistan and US, you must also very good relation with the Twitter and Facebook to create a good image. Now this is the play of the not tech giants company. Okay, sir.
Yeah,
Good.
sure.
Well,
So
well,
I
on,
think
on
yeah, just 1 minute. I think Velina wishes to add something. Just one word and one buzzword to keep: nomad country. This is
Uh,
coined by Balaji Srinivasan.
no,
So nomad
there is
country
another
means
word.
huge
No,
also.
no, there is
Yeah.
another word. These are digital nomads. Now, yeah, there is another word, is digital nomad. Suppose I am a person from India, but I am getting the job somewhere in digital company in France. I may go to the France, then I will go to the Austria, then I go to the China, then I go to the, but I am global citizenship, but I am a digital nomad. So it's a very interesting.
Yes, I wanted to wrap up so that our audience also understands how complex the environment has become. Because on the one side, we have institutional approaches. We have major institutions trying to somehow regulate this domain. Then we have I mean, particularly the European Union is such a clear case, which is pushing for the human centrist approach when it comes to AI, but also when it comes to other sectors and domains, such as, for instance, data protection. Then we have states which are still quite powerful and want to impose their way, they way how they see actually the use of artificial intelligence, such as the case with China, for instance. But even United States is still very, very dominant in the area. And then we have corporations. We have corporations that do not pursue national interests, and they do not pursue interests of citizens. These are corporatist agencies and actors that would do anything that serves their corporatist interests, and we should be very much aware of that. I mean, the very fact that the Taliban have an official account on Twitter, while the former president of the United States has been, in fact, banned from social media, is quite revealing. We have so many terrorist organizations which are on some banned terrorist organizations lists, still, reaching out to people via social media. I mean, it's quite revealing that corporations can also shape the narrative. And what I also want to say in terms of new terms is that I also see it going in the direction of a digital inquisition of the human soul, because the next thing that will come is combining technologies such as, for instance, chips or implants with AI. And then we have an absolutely new level of clusterfuck, if you like. Sorry for for this word, but in a sense, you have completely new level, which is totally unregulated. So just to give another idea how precarious the situation is.
Sure. I
I
think
may
Maxim
also
wishes.
add,
Yeah.
quickly, because we have been talking about corporations for quite a while, and here I would like to support Pivardan's point that I mean, first of all, it's true that they have lots of power and they have gained through time much more, I mean, a lot of power. At the same time, it's not only China who is cracking down on this big tech. There are other these big actors, US and the EU. I mean, the EU more stronger, but just differently. Mainly through the competition law tools. EU has been very strong in this, and actually there is convergence now in the US. US is changing its approach to this. Previously very critical of the EU approach, now it's actually changing its own approach, and that's why I'm not. I mean, because they finally realize what kind of power they possess and how markets have been shaped by them, and not only markets, as you rightly mentioned, also policies. And that's why I'm kind of doubtful that they will retain that power for long that they have gained. I'm talking about big tech. So we kind of living in times where that there is this power shift will happen, or is already happening.
I think one word to add more, and then we can end. As Maxim very rightly said, I think in innovation law or competition law, there will be, I don't know, maybe due to these pseudo states, there could be an innovation monopsony. So I think this is something which we should look forward to. So yeah, Mridulpal, I think I'll stop there. So sorry. Yeah.
No, it's absolutely fine. I think asking questions and getting responses is something that gets monotonous at a certain extent of time, and after that, if people interact, it gets really nice, and it gets I believe that this panel has been going really nice as well. Right from the starting of the panel at the backstage level. Okay, so I would like to inform you, Abhivardhan, that you cited the name of Davos. Other than that, there is, or I don't know, like take this with a pinch of salt, because I received this article on 5th of August, and it was written on 5th of August, but I don't know if it is true or not. But there is this tool called Raghav, a artificial intelligence painting app, which has been given a co-authorship of a copyright by the Indian Copyright Office, and it has been created by Ankit Sahni, who is an IP lawyer as well. So I think that might as might just be the first instance of recognition of an AI based application in terms of intellectual property rights. Okay, my next question would be to Sanjay Nutani, sir. Sir, what are the changes that you believe will be observed in the coming years in the Indo-Pacific region and in Europe in terms of big leaps in technological advancements? And how might such an advancement affect the regions in terms of revenue generation for the respective states? And how do you think the profession of law will be affected?
So, Mritutpal, let me be very, very honest. After hearing all the panelists speaking, uh, this whole thing of the corporation, the whole thing about how the government, citizen, digital citizen, two, three things I think we need to sort of make it sound very simple, even though it is the very, very complicated situation what we are living in, is that as far as whatever technologies we talk about it, we have actually, as a human race, we have already imagined a very, very broad outline of what is to be expected. You know, so one thing is very sure: no matter which direction we take, sustainability is going to play a major role in shaping the future. And I think from that perspective, we will have to sort of start thinking exactly to what level can we, sort of put ourselves into beyond what we are already thinking. And now coming to the question in terms of the economic sort of growth, I think COVID-19 actually played a role of advancing most of these technologies, and the kind of use which we were hoping to see in sort of a decade. I think it's fast forward and we are already there. We've seen exactly how services economies, we've seen jobs, we've seen the role of all of these technologies. Now, today when I talk to some of our clients, to some of our regulators, we already see that at a level, at an individual level, at a corporate level, at a governmental level, and then I'll slice it into each of this. Today, uh, on the operational side, we see warehouse management, we see just-in-time delivery, we see robotics, we see drones being applied in terms of artificial intelligence, and we see all of that. Now let's come to the government situation. As far as government situation is concerned, I completely agree with what Valina said, that the role of the institutions, regulators, central banks is, actually become very, very difficult. You know, eh, let's take India as an example, and I don't sort of see today India, you may say, has to somewhere in this whole Indo-Pacific, unfortunately, will be pushed to take a side. Now, we know which side it will go. But at the same time, if you see within the country, government and at its own level, in the garb of telling its people that yes, we are going to keep you data safe, we are going to ensure that you are regulated, we are going to ensure that your data remains with you, and blah, blah, blah. Ultimately, that power of data is something which we are trying to snatch from the data companies to government. Now, we are living in the tug of war between the regulator and between the companies, that exactly where is this data going to be and with whom and how it is going to be. So, to that extent, the situation has become very, very complicated. And what I'm trying to sort of come down to this whole situation is that today, as lawyers, today, as regulators, when we speak, uh, you know, we may say, okay, India is coming out with its own domestic regulations, India is coming with its privacy regulation, India is coming with its own regulation in terms of how it needs to deal with all these companies. But ultimately, on a very, very higher scale, today when India is going to be actually discussing a lot of, multilateral, bilateral kinds of agreements, issues such as privacy, IP, protection of source codes, all of this requires to be, you know, sort of understood, clearly applied, and then you will have to sort of see, because today in trade, at the WTO, what is the principle? That a national treatment, that I will treat exactly foreign companies and Indian companies alike. That's a general broader basis of understanding today we have. But with these kinds of technologies, with these kinds of pulls and pushes, how exactly are we going to be able to do these kinds of things? And that's a challenging part. Last and not the least, let me come to the world of lawyers. In some form and manner, I agree with Amit that when he spoke about in this earlier question about technology, that I'm a technology guy and I don't understand policy, I don't understand lawyers. I think it's the same fear which lawyers have, that we don't understand technology and we don't understand all of this. Ultimately, we both will have to sort of sit down with each other, hold our hands, understand what exactly are we talking about, and therefore, whether today as a law firm, today as legal people, today as governments, we will have to onboard all the IT professionals, technology experts, engineer coders, software developers. All of these will be a community which will have to sit down together and play its role, because, like even Maxim said, there are certain you know things which today we are talking about, where actually AI will be applied in terms of judiciary. Today we are talking about a concept known as data judges. Now it scares me to understand what is this concept of data judges. So the question here is, we are all going in that gusto, but ultimately where we are going to sort of end, unfortunately none of us have the boundaries. There used to be a time and purpose where the boundaries of geographical used to bound, but unfortunately today it's an open space, and that is where it is going to lead us to. So, to end it very, very sort of simply, I think we will, as a race, we will, as a human race, will have to sort of come to certain realities of exactly how do we want to sort of take it to the next step, before it sort of before I like this example of Amit when he spoke about Homo sapiens, and the difference between us monkeys is intelligence. So at one stage now, I'm sort of getting to fear whether this intelligence will be stronger than the human race where we are. So I think that is where we'll have to sort of try and reach out and control, to take it to the next logical manner. Thank you.
Well, with regards to what Sanjay sir said, I read somewhere that we as Homo sapiens, as humans, we we behave on a scale of 5. We behave as fives on the food cycle, but actually we are 2.2s right next to urchins and avocados or something like that, probably. But the only thing that differentiates us from them and makes us behave like level fives is, there are two things. One is our ability of to reason, and the second is our technology. So, in that sense, funnily, if the animal kingdom decides to take over the earth and enslave the human race, they would only need to take out our technology to do that. So, and if in some distant future it is the technology that is trying to enslave us or trying to disrupt something, now that's something scary that I don't want to imagine. Okay, so my last question for this panel goes to Abhivardhan. What, according to you, drags India, that is Bharat, behind in terms of technological innovations and awareness as well as commercial awareness, and what keeps India from embracing its deep cultural roots and channeling the same into the work being done? And what are the policy dynamics that need changing for the better for the future?
Thank you so much. So I'll keep it very short because we know that we have already crossed the 60-minute deadline. but it's a culture. I mean, when we do long panels, it already goes till 1:30, so I'm pretty okay with that. I hope that we all bear together. So I think when we see culture, so in policy, something can be like you reach from one point to another point. There's a question of destination. You have a destination to do. It happens in international relations, it happens in public law, it happens in private law as well, and everywhere it happens, right? There is a particular policy that, yes, from A to B you go. But it's not necessary that that's the only way, because there's something called cyclicity. So in Indian culture, from our scriptures to our history, we see that, and even when we describe our seasons, the four seasons in the tropical rainforest climate of India, you'll see that there are four kinds of seasons, right? Now, India is in a current shape that I can say that, okay, fine, few days ago in my city it was raining heavily, but it's now we are trying to get into the October and the autumn season. So we have a cyclic understanding of time. We have a cyclic understanding of justice. We have a cyclic understanding of, I would say, and in Hindi it is known as dharma. In Sanskrit also dharma, justice. Nyaya, again related to it, dharma is the ethical construct of it, I would say. So culturally, what happens? Since we are talking about algorithms a lot, we have a concept of rhythm. Rhythm means kind of a rhythm. So it's kind of an algorithmic understanding of the cosmic order, which is cyclic in nature. So that is how our policy constructs are built. Now that can happen for AI technologies when it comes to environmental issues, maybe even in climate security. I don't know. I don't see any much role of AI technologies in climate security right now, but it could be. So I am hypothesizing there a bit. Yet, as I've said, that we are cyclic and dharma is very important. It very much alludes to a very interesting statement by Dr. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan, who used to be an ambassador, of course, the second president of India. He used to work in UNESCO as well, ironically, and even in the League of Nations before the Second World War. He actually said that cyclicity is, he not said basically, his works show, he did not say it, his works show that cyclicity in understanding semblance and bringing that on the table, which could progress further, is always the important question. Now, for the Indo-Pacific, India is a very important actor. And on a cultural ground, I see the role of India as a cultural source or a cultural fountainhead, because uh, the Indo-Chinese cultures, and the Chinese should also thank us, the Chinese culture also, Indo-Chinese is now your Southeast Asian countries and Japan. Um all of these cultures have been heavily inspired by India. So even their policy dynamics have some interrelatability. That is something which we see even in the Asian states. Ironically, I remember that Velina stated about India's role in the Cold War in a little bit sense that India was the country which was able to maintain itself. It was able to float around, right? When the Sino-Soviet split happened, and even when the Bangladesh related issue happened with the Mukti Bahini thing in 1971. What I meant to say was the conflict with East Pakistan, which of course seceded from Pakistan to become Bangladesh. And if we remember at the time, they were very high times with Richard Nixon, and we know that Taiwan was removed from the UNSC after the amendment of the UN Charter, and the CCP's PRC was added. So cyclicity is something which we understand. Asians, especially Indians, are very much capable to understand complex situations, which make them estimate cyclic approaches. Now, how far are we going to see? And this cannot be completely governmental, because we know that cultures are decentralized part of human life. They are not governed by the state. They are only regulated by the state when it comes to human rights and basic human dignity, which are like right to life or a right to privacy and all of those things, which we know in fundamental rights. Or if we talk about the UDHR to start with of 1948. But I think on a context of that, the role of private actors will again be very important here. And there I'm talking about the MSMEs and the other, I would say, minds who will be working on cultural intelligence. Because I think what is happening is that Western economies, especially in UK, US, and all the others, they need some strategic autonomy even on culture, and that's something which will help in to the people. Of course, it does not have a larger role when it comes to the hard power course. Since I talk about soft power more than hard power, it will have a very important role in shaping even the idea of a pseudo state, as we were talking about nomad countries, innovation, one obscene as for, and of course the pseudo states which are your big tech and so forth, because even their value systems. So there's a book by Anu Bradford on the European Union. She states that, for example, let's take an example and finish it fast. So the European, if there's a YouTube channel and hate speech guidelines are applied, the hate speech guidelines are applied in the US, correct? YouTube is, of course, an US company, it will apply there. But the jurisprudential interpretation, from where has it come from? The First Amendment of the US Constitution? No. It has come from the European Union's guidelines. So, very much we see, even when it comes to other particular guidelines of these social media companies, that very much inspired from the European standards. Of course, there might be deviations also. Like, for example, with GDPR, we see conflicts that a big tech, of course, has to pay fines, and there are other issues. I'm not saying that there is a completely direct alignment. That's not possible. But inspiration is, of course, there. So, regulatory sovereignty, of course, has a lot to do with the government. But as cultural semblance is important, I think India will guide in its own right, in its own way, like what Japan used to do in its own times. As the concept of ikigai came from Japan, and even the Japanese culture influenced the world in its own way. We talk about the anime, but we do not remember that Japanese culture is much about replenishing itself, because effects of climate change, except effects of information warfare, they create conflict economies. So how preservation as well as ensuring that human autonomy and dignity stays there at a cultural level, it's something which India, of course, has to ponder upon. But I think private actors have more role to play in the governments. So, of course, I think the panelists can add further. Yeah. Ridhipal? Yeah.
Yes. So, if I believe we are we are at the end of this session, Abhivardhan, I would also like to ask of you that if we are is there like, I don't know if we should address this here or not, but if we are to actually talk about the cultural prerogatives and ancestry and the roots that we as Indians have, if we are to discuss that, and if we are to relate it with the cyclicity, and we are to relate it with artificial intelligence and technology dominance and soft power, w- there must be reasons for it to be significant in terms of soft law, in terms of soft power.
So one line answer to the question, since we are already little bit late, let's discuss it post live session end. And of course, I would say that yes, there is a significance. Therefore, only one word. You need strategic cultural intelligence for maintaining and also advancing human skills. That's the simple answer to the question. But of course, in detail, let's discuss after the live discussion.
Abhivarjan, I
So
have
yeah.
the only one line. If my line is that the now the war will be end at one point. A new war will be going to start. That is a competition between the metallic intelligence and natural intelligence. Please note down it. Because it will be the challenge for next after 25 years. It will be one of the biggest challenge in the world. As a AI scholar, I am telling you. Then we should forget every kind of things. A terrorist found every blah blah, every kind of problems will. There is only one challenge for it will be going to be happen. The competition between the natural intelligence and metallic intelligence. And now we
Great.
must prepare ourselves for the next 20 years or 25 years, because machines are going to be more and more intelligent day by day. For example, you take the example of Alexa, right? I think you are using in your home the Alexa. Suppose a single Alexa programmed by a single company, by the Amazon, right? But Alexa is using by the somewhere in Americans, somewhere in the Chinese, somewhere in Indians, somewhere in Europeans, and everywhere the phonetics is different. But think about the Alexa; they're too intelligent, or too now they know how to track the words frequency and everything. Behavioral intelligence, they are growing their behavior. Similarly, there are a lot of machines around us, they are growing their own behavioral intelligences. Even we are using this net connection now, we are going to be in part of the intelligent net connections. Now everything is going to be behaviorally intelligent. Now think about after 20 years, what will be the performance of the machine, those softwares, when they maybe they accumulated lot of behaviors among them, human behaviors. This is a challenge for us, a challenge for the complete world human race.
Well. In alignment with what Amit sir said, I don't know if the panelists here are acquainted with Marvel Cinematic Universe or the comics or not, but there is a particular anti-hero who is called the Taskmaster, who is actually able to mimic all the moves and all the, in fact, the thinking processes of all the Marvel heroes. So, if an behaviorally intelligent system can do that, imagine what the world can become. So on that note, let's not be pessimistic, let's be optimistic, and on that note, we are going to be ending to this panel. So thank you to everyone who's been present here. Thank you to all our listeners, to all our viewers. um, I believe we are going to be having the Indocon 2022 in next year, and I believe it's going to be even better. To our panelists, uh, we extend the most heartfelt of welcome and the most heartfelt of gratitude to all of you for being here. Thanks a lot. Thank you. For today, Godspeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.